Good evening and welcome to this Sunday special episode of Africa Talks. And today we'll be discussing about the whole process of urbanization that is gaining much momentum in Africa, in various African countries. And today we'll be focusing particularly on Uganda. Recently, the Parliament of Uganda in the month of April have passed a resolution to develop 15 new cities in the country. And from various sectors, the demand has been coming up in Uganda to involve youth in developing these cities. Because ultimately, it is the youth that will be inhabiting these cities in the coming years. And these cities should be the cities of their choice, cities of their dream, cities where they can live, earn, work happily. So to talk more about that, we have 4 panelists today with us. First of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Kayondo Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert, welcome to Africa Talks.
Thank you. Thank you
Mr.
very
Gilbert
much.
is Speaker of Fort Portal Municipal Council Tourism City, and he's joining us from Uganda. Our second panelist today is Ms. Ruchi Verma. Ms. Verma is CEO of Humankind, a unique social design enterprise. Ms. Verma, welcome to Africa Talks. She is an architect and urban designer by training and also a sustainable development expert. So we'll be having your views on the kind of urban development that Africa can have and what are the learnings from Indian experience for African countries. Our third panelist today is Mr. Francis Mwange. Mr. Mwange is pursuing his law degree in India. He's studying in the Indian state of Gujarat. Mr. Francis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
And our fourth panelist today is Mr. Iziogo Namdi, who is a Pan-African and is co-founder of Exilient Africa. Mr. Namdi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great. Uganda, almost a decade back, in fact, more than a decade back, developed a vision document for itself called Uganda 2040. And the whole idea was to harness the social and economic potential of the country to develop a new country in the next 3 decades. Now we are in 2020, and it is estimated that by 2040, 21 million people will be staying in various Ugandan cities. And recently, in the month of April, the Ugandan parliament has passed a resolution that 15 new Ugandan cities would be developed in the country. What kind of cities these would be? Would these be sustainable cities? Would these be inclusive cities? Would these cities would be the dream cities of African youth or Ugandan youth? To know more about that, I would like to go to Mr. Kayondo Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert, please give us a background that why this decision has been taken of developing these 15 cities, and what kind of impact it will going to have on Uganda.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gilbert Kayondo. I'm a councillor representing the people of Kasusu, Fort Portal Municipality in Uganda. I'm also the Speaker of Fort Portal Municipal Council in Uganda. I'm 31 years old. I have been actively involved in youth politics for over 10 years now. Youth issues for over 10 years now. And I am so glad to be part of this global panel to discuss how the youth can shape their future and that of their communities. So this evening, I'm here to discuss about urbanization in Uganda. First of all, urbanization refers to population shift from the rural to urban areas. When we talk of urbanization, we expect population shift from rural to urban areas. And a sustainable and inclusive city is the one that will stand the test of time with negatively affecting our environment. A sustainable and inclusive city when we talk about the cities in Uganda, people will think that cities now, they are going to chase away people in town. Things are going to be expensive in town. No, these cities we want in Uganda, they are supposed to be inclusive. Inclusive is the city ability to accommodate all citizens, whether rich or poor, the youth, the elders, the disabled. All of them, they are supposed to keep in that city. And they are supposed to keep there inclusively. How can this be achieved? There must be effective and efficient usage of space, putting into consideration environmental concerns, putting in place a well-considered physical structure plans to ensure that they are all adhered to. If the physical plan is there, but is it followed? Are people, when they are building houses, are they having plans? Or they are just building? And is that plan accommodating other people? Is it favoring other communities? Or it is only for the rich? Number two, to protect wetland and green spaces, water bodies, and other issues of greening. Number four, water management in terms of fighting floods. I'll give you an example. Right now in Uganda, we have serious issues in the district of Kasese because of floods. So if there is no proper planning, and if we have these cities and we just go like that, we shall be facing challenges of floods. But now, since we are seeing what is happening in Kasese, as the people of Fort Portal now, we must emphasize on proper planning to avoid floods in future to come. Number five, supporting the private sector through different government programs to ensure availability of jobs and skilling of the youth. Private sectors, 70% of our youth here, they're in the private sector. It's where they get their survival from. So supporting private sector, it's also an important issue. The mindset change of the people towards the understanding of urbanization is also critical. Mindset change, our mindset change.
I think that's a very important point which Mr. Gilbert has raised. The mindset change. This is something which is going to have a major impact on any urbanization process. We'll come back to you, Mr. Gilbert, on that issue again in the show. Going to you, Ruchi Verma, you have been working for several years now on developing sustainable urban spaces. How do you see, the role of youth from, how do you associate youth in building cities? And especially what Mr. Gilbert has said, can youth bring that mindset change in developing the kind of urban spaces they need for the coming generation?
Good evening to the panel, and thank you for inviting me. First of all, what Honorable Councillor just mentioned, I think the vision and the approach to the vision has the key factors quite in place. So I'm happy to hear that he mentioned inclusion, he mentioned proper planning, and also there is a approach to climate proofing in the approach. But in all of this, do we have a culture of health and human rights inbuilt in the planning? And when I say this, it also means, does the youth have a voice from the very beginning? All these 15 cities which the Ugandan government has announced of going as, they are converting from towns to cities. They are not greenfield projects as such. They are not barren lands which are going to be new cities. So already there are inhabitants there. Already they had a voice and a say into the systems that they are living in, they want to be in. And the second instance which I read in the Ugandan 2040 plan was this vision statement, where they were mentioning how they want to go from peasant-based to a modern planned cities. Now here comes those two questions. What peasant-based ecosystems have? They are very family-based. They're close-knit structures. And what does it mean by modern cities? Can we retain the same cities or not? So here I would call, if you are referring to the role of youth, first of all is in terms of vision building. Why do we need to have one single vision for the 15 cities? Can't we have 15 new models or 15 models which are very local? Because right now, in the spirit of SDGs and the new urban agenda, the focus is localism. So can we look at the role of youth to shape this vision? Now that the Ugandan government has this larger policy, and also African Union has a larger vision altogether for the continent, how do you actually distill it down to the local level? And how can context play a very strong role? So can the youth, first of all, come in place to actually be the given a voice and given a right to decide what kind of a city do they want to live in? Maybe
Yes.
it is also very closely knit like earlier, but this is a new model, because in India we see that we must have gone through motorized planning and new anything which is coming from the West. But now we are also looking at new models where farming is part of the city. It's not something outside the city. So I think Uganda has a very open opportunity to involve youth, and definitely then we go up the ladder. We have them in participation in the plans, we have them participating in the policies, we have them looking at as entrepreneurs and building the system and the public system, rather than everything being privately owned or jobs being all in the private sector. And obviously, Councillor is an example of local leadership in the youth. Uganda has over 80% population below 30, and it's a huge opportunity for the country. And it should be well used and well invested when thinking of these 15 cities.
Yes. So, engaging youth since the beginning of the project would have a much more, direct bearing on the outcomes, because it will define the vision of that project and how localized that vision is. Coming to you, Mr. Izioga Namdi, do you think African youth or African government is serious about engaging with youth as far as urbanization is concerned?
Well, thank you very much. A very good evening to all of our panelists here and the listeners, audience. I think the African governments, respective governments, are actually working hard. The African Union has currently initiated the AU wing, which has been there running. And there's a lot of projects that they are doing, which has a lot of youthful participation. Before I proceed, I'd like to also recognize the efforts which have been made, particularly by the Youth Line Forum. They are a youth-led and focused organization grounded in movement building for a strong youth sector in Uganda particularly. And I think they have their presence spread across the East African region. Also, the Choro Elders Forum for spearheading efforts in streamlining development of these new cities. So if you've seen, like, we're having this conversation right now, and the involvement and position of Honorable here, it goes a long way to tell us that the African government are not putting youth behind this time around. They've realized also that it's time for youth to come closer as partners in the shared future for Africa. If we cannot have youth involvement right now, then I don't think there is any need to look at sustainability of whatever projects it is that we're looking at or working towards. So I think the African governments are very, very committed. We just have to, commit our own selves as youth, because most times what we have as a challenge is also from the youth side. So when youths get such close to the power, they become deviated, So we need that focus to be there with the youths, the Ugandan youths in particular, and the African youths in general.
Okay, so I think that's a very relevant point, that the focus and the energy of youth needs to be channelized in a very productive way to make a very outcome oriented partnership with the government. Coming to you, Francis, you are studying in India. You are from Uganda. How do you see the current scenario of urbanization in your country? What are the challenges in the current cities which you want to overcome when the new cities, start developing in your country?
Thank you so much, Mr. Narendra. And I'm very pleased to be on this panel with the Honorable Kayonda Gilbert, alongside other panelists. First of all, I would like to just point it out a bit that Uganda right now has one major city. That's the capital, Kampala. It has got 22 municipalities alongside 134 other districts. The number of districts has almost tripled in the last 15 years. And the government has been having this argument that the reason as to why it's increasing this number of districts is to extend services or to bring services nearer to the people, which is a very solid point. But then ever since the establishment of these new districts, some of them have not been able to perform as expected when it comes to service delivery. So now proposals being passed for the gazetting of new districts, 15 districts, or sorry, 15 cities, of which 7 are to commence from July 1st. Well, we would ask how has been the performance of these other districts and municipalities that the government has been creating in the first place, and if really service delivery was the main target, how well has it been achieved for us now to proceed further into establishing new cities or gazetting new cities? And I would still question Honorable Gilbert, now that at least you're closer. Would this be really a feasible strategy to establish new cities at this moment, whereby the economy is not at its best given the current challenges of the pandemic and all this stuff? Because as I'm sure of right now, the budget for the establishment of these new cities was not included in the recently passed budget.
Yeah.
The money to cater for all these new districts has not been included in this recently passed budget. So it poses in a number of questions when it comes to how the implementation of these new cities is going to happen when it comes to bankrolling the activities and management of all that goes along with new cities. The other aspect that I would like to shortly look at is that maybe that the youth have got really nice and brilliant ideas, but they have not been engaged fully in the running of these new districts, new municipalities, and even right now when they are going to establish new cities as we speak, very few youth have really gotten involved much in what's taking place in their own territories. Because if you talk of a new city, it means that very many people are coming into one place. That means so many job opportunities coming in. That means market creation. That means service extension, which goes with electricity, health sector, education, and all this. So it needs that all the youth really should take keen interest in matters that really affect them, because it's not a majority of the population that's living in these urban cities that are yet to be created, and the city that's in place, it's you find that it's basically youth, ranging from the age between 18 to 35. These are mostly the people who are coming in looking for opportunities and avenues to make ends meet.
Yeah. So Francis, I think, raised an important point during his arguments that though youth has a lot of ideas, but they're not, they don't get opportunity to get engaged so much. with their municipalities or within the administration of their own cities. So, Mr. Gilbert, would you like to, throw some light on how you are going to engage youth in this process of developing cities? What are your thoughts on it?
Yes, it's true, Mr. Francis. It's true, Mr. Francis, that this money for for funding of the city was not budgeted for in the Uganda's budget. But I got a chance. We met with the Minister of Local Government in Uganda, and he informed us that the money is there. They are going to make what we call a supplementary budget to see that these cities are well funded. And when we met the Minister of Local Government, we informed him that we need these cities, the youth must be involved in the leadership, in the technical part of it. And when we discussed with him, we told him it is critical for local authorities to create space for dialogue and also consultation within the youth. There must be dialogue and the consultation within the youth. This strengthens the relationship between the community members and also the local authorities. So, because 70% of our population in Uganda, it's all about the youth. We don't want to see, when it comes to leadership, we only see old faces. So we told him even there is a big challenge. That one comes when it comes to nomination fees. If you want to contest, the issue of nomination fee should be reduced, because you may find a youth want to participate in elections, but he or she doesn't have the nomination fee to participate in election. So all these issues were brought up to the minister, that when it comes to nomination fees be reduced. It is also important to include the youth and communities in policy making process through active involvement in consultative process or both. So whenever the youth must be involved in the consultative process. So it is also important to integrate the youth into existing policy platforms and also support their participations, rather than creating separate youth platforms through which youth can engage policies. Youth must be involved in whatever we are doing when we are preparing for the city. Also, the commitment and active involvement of the city policy makers in the youth programs and projects is also an important factor for the success of the youth leaders, or for the youth focused city development projects. The focus of because some of the youth, they have their projects. Some of the youth have their businesses. For example, the food vendors. Most youth in our town, Fort Portal, they have their businesses. They are food vendors. They sell chapatis, they sell food on streets. So the city, we don't want, when the city comes, those youth will be sent away or sent back to the villages. No, let us have a plan for them. Let us redesign. We allocate them where they're supposed to do their businesses from. Sending away, it will not help, because the city came, the city must accommodate the poor and the rich. So we are also engaging the stakeholders. We are engaging the ministry, we are engaging government, that we have received this city, but let us, all of us, be inclusive. All of us, let us enjoy the city, especially the youth. Right. Also, yes?
Yeah. Continue.
Yes. Also, local authorities need to take the informal sector into account as a positive resource for cities. Informal sector. Those are the guys whom I was talking about. The food vendors, the hawkers, the boda raiders, because 80% of the youth in Uganda, they're in boda business. When you see the boda raiders, 80% are youth, but 80% are youth in boda business. So
So what we need to emphasize on is to put more focus in the private sector. The government should support the private sector so that it can also it can improve, so that the youth can get jobs. Youth can also improve on their businesses. Thank you.
Yes. I think, Ruchi, coming to you, Mr. Kayondo Gilbert has raised two very interesting points in his arguments. One is the political participation of youth, and they are very much involved in it. They want young leaders to run these cities, and they are working on it. And secondly, the emphasis on the informal sector. It really amazes me because in India, after decades of urbanization, now we have started focusing on, giving some importance to informal sector, which is omnipresent in Indian cities. And it's really good that in Uganda, the discussion is happening before starting these cities, So I think this is the most opportune time for them to discuss about the role of informal, economy and the people who are involved in it. In India, have you seen any kind of youth engagement in urbanization process at the municipality level or at the city level? Have you come across any such dedicated and important initiatives taken by the government or the civil society, or maybe together government and government agencies and non-governmental organizations together? Have you come across any such initiatives in any part of the country?
So before I answer that, I just want to highlight on the phase where Uganda is right now. Actually, they are right now 15% urban, and as per by 2040, they are trying to go 60% urban. So the rate of urbanization itself is actually pretty aggressive, and one has to, cultivate a very soft process of going towards this, because we all know by the time the policies are created and implemented, the time is already gone by a lot. So this is one, and the second is Uganda also has a national youth policy from 2001, and it actually enlists everything in terms of what youth and how should youth be focused in multiple areas, not generally urbanization. Maybe that was not the time when it was thought. So the first thing, which is a recommendation from my side, would be, with a lack of urban policy, similar to India, we also don't have a national urban policy, and so will Uganda not have any till now. So how can the two be seen in tandem? And then urban action plans for these secondary cities be developed with the youth. Secondly, when I'm coming now to what is happening in India, so we also have a very wide bottom line. So we have basically our more than 34% population is below 18, and you can take it to up to 40-45%, which is the youth in general. And we kind of extended till 35 as well. So in all of this, the role of youth has become really important. So from the government level, I'll say, because I'm also part of the Atal Innovation Mission as a mentor for schools, the Atal Innovation Mission also has Atal Incubation Centers. So this whole idea of incubators and an entrepreneurial mindset, giving youth a platform and an agency to become part of nation building, is becoming very critical. And there, because they know their locals, they know their ethnic groups, they know the groups from where they come from, the solutions are really apt. So one of the solutions which I was, example which I'll mention is the Atal Innovation, under Atal AICs, the incubators. And there are many private and philanthropic incubators also investing in urban livability now, because everybody is going urban. Otherwise, there are local leaders and local champions who are invested in, bringing inclusion right to the people, to the government. So they are acting as intermediaries, and there are many such examples across the country.
Okay, great. So I think some of these examples can be useful for Uganda also. So when you are planning towards involving Ugandan youth in the development of these cities, I think you also must look into what India has done as far as involving youth in various urban development projects. Yes, Ruchi? Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to add, Uganda actually has an opportunity to define what urban means for them. For example, in India, it is like and any urban area will not have any farming activity. But if their DNA is based on such, a culture like this, even if they have infrastructure, there is a huge thing about behavior change in the people as well. So why not have a definition of urban which is contextual to Uganda, and that can be explored with the youth, because in these 20 years, by the time the Uganda 2040 vision is, the youth will be invested citizens, will be the citizens who will be role models for the coming generations.
Okay, great. I think that's a very important point. Coming to you, Francis, what kind of role do you see the Ugandan diaspora playing in this whole urbanization process, which, as Ruchi described, it's quite aggressive in nature, because you are planning to shift from 15% to 60% in next 20 years, and that will take a lot of efforts. So how do you see the role of African diaspora, and specifically the Ugandan diaspora, in it? Yeah, please unmute yourself. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Narendra, for that question. Always the Ugandans and diaspora have been a part, or an integral part, of developing Ugandan economy, given the remittances that they send back home and all of this. But then for this particular instance of developing now these new existing, these newly yet to be set cities, I believe that the Ugandans abroad, most of us, especially now, like me, a student in my capacity, I have learned a lot from India, as my fellow panelist, Ruchi, has shared with you all. And I believe that if I'm to go back in my country, I would be eager to participate in discussions that engage youth on what kind of cities they would love to see. What would they, what kind of policies would they love to be passed in their own cities for their proper development? So for the case of students who have gone abroad to study, they could exchange their experiences on the successful projects that they have seen work elsewhere in these other countries that they have been to, that could be feasible in our own country. So it could be another opportunity for them to also exchange ideas, and where possible, also the way we talk about our own countries. Now, for example, in my case, the way I love to market my own country here in India, it can be another avenue of probably attracting any investor who would wish to come and be a part of this rapidly growing economy, this young economy, and would wish to invest in any project that is to be declared in all these number of cities that are going to be passed.
Okay, Mr. Kayondo Gilbert, you raised a very interesting point about political participation of youth, and you also had in your meeting with the minister, you also raised the point of reducing the nomination fee also. Yes. So in India, it has been an uphill task for youngsters joining mainstream politics. So how do you see how difficult it would be for youth in your country to enter into the political domain, and what kind of role you are playing to provide more access to youth in your country for political participation?
It is really difficult for the youth in Uganda to participate in elections, to participate in political positions in our country. Because I will give you an example. To contest as a member of parliament, you are supposed to pay nomination fee of 2 million. And you find we have a capable youth who can manage to contest on that post, but he will lack the 2 million Ugandan shillings to pay for nomination fee. So also we address this issue in the Parliament of Uganda. We want that fee to be changed. But the biggest challenge we have, the parliamentarians now, whom we have now, they are the incumbent. They cannot change that. It has become difficult. They cannot change it because they know that we shall unseat them in their seats. So they left it there, and it is still a serious issue here in Uganda. But we have, it is not only, youth are not supposed only to participate in being an MP. No, there are other posts where, like me, I'm now aspiring for the division mayor in our one of the division in Fort Portal City. I'm aspiring for the division mayor. I know the fee, it won't be too much because they have seen a youth has come up to contest. So, but what I know there, the fee is not much. But what we also, as the youth, what we are appealing to government is that let there be a change in that nomination fee, because it is affecting most of the capable youth who are willing to lead this country.
Yeah. Yes. Mr. Isiuga Namdi, you have been interacting with youth from several African countries. Do you see this kind of excitement among youths to have more say politically in their respective countries? Have you seen an increasing inclination of youth in Africa towards political leadership in their own countries or cities? Have you seen this kind of trend, or it's only limited to a specific cities or specific countries in Africa, like Uganda?
Well, I think Africa up till date has been ruled by those who are independence fighters, like the founding fathers of various African countries, or the generation immediately after them are still the ones who are ruling. And, you know, it gets to the stage where you decide to take mantle of leadership, take matters into your own hand. So that has been happening in a lot of countries, not just Uganda. In Nigeria, I think the president, Muhammadu Buhari, recently, I think a couple of years back, signed the not too young to run bill. So there's usually an age limit that restricts you also in terms of contesting for political positions. But I think also, despite the fact that politics is interwoven in all of the things we do as humans, I think people should focus more on other strategies. You know, there are a lot of ways that we can actually engage these people, amplify our voice, and participate in matters that affect us. And they are not much of a difficult issue, but first, I think youths need to get it right. Because if we do not come together as young people, if we do not share ideas with ourselves, if we do not cooperate in establishing projects and actually seeing these projects come to fulfillment, if we do not think sustainable and look at ways whereby we could actually enhance development. See, for example, we're talking about technology today. You know, a lot of the African countries are still so back in terms of technology. We've got students, we've got youth, people who have the capacity to just sit down and come up with a concept, code, if it's coding, if it's artificial intelligence, if it's software development, they could do these things by coming together. But, you know, the mindset is still fixed on things that are not, you know, there needs to be that mindset change first, I think. When we get that mindset change, then we can be able to proceed further, because whether we like it or not, like my mom would always say, these people are dinosaurs, you know, like, I mean, in terms of not name calling anyone, but it gets, that is something that is inevitable. It would come to us all. And you know, by age also, you know, they get tired, they get exhausted. So it's definitely the mantle of leadership will fall onto us as young people, so long as we're still in the system. But when it comes to our turn, do we want to make the same mistake, or do we want to lead a different generation? Do we want to focus more on sustainable? Do we want to do things differently, or we want to still play the same circle? So I think the African youth have to focus more on themselves. It starts from you and I, Mr. Gilbert and Francis, because I think speaking about Africa, it's us here right now. So it starts with us. We need to cooperate. We need to look at things from a more social angle, because that's the only place that we can actually effect change. If we go capital, if we go looking at profits, then we'll have a lot of issues. For example, sorry to add this, if we look at these new cities in Uganda at the moment that have been approved for development, it's going to cause a lot of chaos if there's no proper a backbone in terms of the youth who are involved. So I think the youth needs to get their acts together so that there's a uniform presentation. And I think that's the only strength we have, and we can be able to achieve more if we work on ourselves first.
Yeah, so youth needs to come together and with a new mindset, so that the youngest continent no more have the oldest political leaders. They also see the young political leaders coming up with the new ideas, new set of directions. Ruchi, you want to contribute something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and as Uganda will show what a progressive country it is, the role of women leaders are also very important.
Exactly.
So especially while looking at youth, we would need to see it through a lens of equity as well. So while being inclusive, you also will have to push forward equity and a shared purpose together.
Yes, so I think equity and gender participation is going to be a very important parameter for these developing cities to become more inclusive in nature. That's a very good point you have added. Ruchi, I would like to come back to you. If you would like to recommend something, some challenges or mistakes that Indian cities committed during the time of their urbanization process, which could help Uganda to be more sustainable in terms of their urban development.
Yes, so actually Uganda can look back and see a lot of mistakes done by many lower middle income countries just to go into rapid urbanization mode. And the lessons, basically, now India is also revisiting many aspects, but I would like to just give you like 4 or 5 pointers of what should be actually taken care of. First of all, you need to look at a very integrated view of planning, and planning both in terms of physical planning but also infrastructure planning. In many Indian cities, we had the infrastructure after the population started inhabiting, and that causes a real problem. So once your backbone, that is the infrastructure, the roads, everything is built, that is the right time to bring in the population rather than them in a way getting affected by it. The second is also having a very focused urban policy. So it has to be participative, it has to be transparent and accountable. These are the three things which will attract the youth. Otherwise, they will not have a sense of belonging or sense of ownership to the work or any commitment any leader wants to show to them. The third is actually invest in local leaders. So like we just spoke a lot about local leadership, you can also look at how government can celebrate local leaders, even if they are not part of the council, like as these political positions, still they are government-led positions. So how can the government come up with certain programs like this? And traditionally, our master plans, that is a physical planning process, which is coming from the West and which mostly our cities had adopted earlier, had been always segregated and land use based, but that is not how humans like to live. We like to live in mixed setups and compact and very much into sustainability. So how do you look at sustainable urban transport connecting people, or how do you look at bicycling and, for example, informal vendors? So already that fabric is there. Try not to break that fabric and introduce a new DNA, because that never works. It will fall short in few years. So how do you integrate the social urban fabric together with whatever changes you want, and looking at a very data driven and evidence based approach? Now we have a lot of tools of mapping and understanding which pocket or which area could be there. So that could help you in climate proofing, in looking future forward and creating the progressive Uganda that is promised in the document.
Thank you so much, Ruchi. I think these are very important considerations that will save a lot of time and money for Ugandan agencies, because India realized down the line after 10 years and 15 years that these are the things that have been done wrong in our urban development process, and now they are trying to rectify it through new ideas, through new plans and new policies. And for Uganda, I think it's a great opportunity to learn from countries like India and see what can work there. Francis, on a lighter note, you're in which city in India?
I'm in Gujarat, right
Gujarat
now,
state.
and
Which
yes,
city?
and the city I'm in is called Vadodara.
Vadodara. What do you like about Vadodara? Anything which you want in your own country? Anything? Any specific, thing from Vadodara you want in your own country? The roads or the layouts or the.
I've liked the planning of the city itself, the roads, and how really the city is well planned for and organized. So if we, like I say, that now for us in our capacity as students who have come to these various countries, for example, like India, we learn so much from such developed economies that we could also suggest some of these improvements or ideas to our very own governments, and then we see changes coming to forth.
Great. I think you must share your experience of staying in Vadodara with some authorities there in Uganda. That what kind of city Vadodara is, what you liked about it, what can be implemented in Uganda too. Mr. Namdi, you are staying in Delhi in NCR. Do you like Delhi NCR? You want to imitate something in your own country from Noida? Where do you stay?
Well, I'm a very Afrocentric person. I see Africa as a continent that actually has its own. It's the origin of civilization. We are still studying, the whole world entirely is still studying what's there in Egypt, and I think a lot of our architecture has been borrowed. We've lost a lot of our history also. That is why maybe we could not be able to get some of these facts. But if you look up Timbuktu in Mali, you see that there are a lot of things that those people did with their hands. And this was ancient civilization. So I think what actually needs to happen in Uganda is just like Ruchi mentioned, is that the people of Uganda, through consultations, identify what they actually want, define for themselves what they want the city to be like. They don't need to borrow something external. They can look at something external, modify it, and conceptualize it to suit their own demographic. So until they are able to do that, if we want to look at, for example, say in Noida now, there are a lot of skyscrapers, the office complexes are there. Some people stay in 16th floor, and we say we want to take 16th floor to a place like Uganda. And electricity generation and distribution might be an issue in terms of running such kind of apartments. Or we look at the way they've planted a lot of trees in the Yamuna Express leading to Agra. And we say we want to replicate the same, rather than looking at developing agro settlements, sort of like a presumption kind of an approach, where people produce what they eat in the same place, thereby achieving sustainability. So I think what has to happen, sadly, Honorable has not been, for technical issues, is not here, is that they look at what they want for their own city, and they can have comparisons and not make mistakes on the long run. So I think that's the best approach.
Great. Ruchi, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was just saying that, for example, the road is not going to be easy, because we've seen that it's very difficult to bring people in, but it has to be a very genuine effort by the government, because one is Africa gave us Ubuntu. So it is the right time to show how Ubuntu actually helps bring urban planning together. And the second is we've all committed to the sustainable development goals, and they can be a very beautiful framework for moving forward, because that in 2030 would be the midway for Uganda 2040. So using that as a framework to develop whatever comes forth would be a good roadmap.
Great. Yes, of course. That would be a good roadmap for Uganda and for other African countries too. So that brings me to the end of this program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a very interesting discussion about the future of Uganda and about the future of various new cities that will be coming up in different African countries. I hope, Mr. Gilbert, the 15 cities that will be coming up in next few years in Uganda, they are more sustainable, inclusive. They provide an equitable space to different genders, and to people involved in formal and informal economy. They turn out to be happy and sustainable cities from the environment point of view also. So thank you so much, Mr. Namdi, for joining us today, Mr. Francis Mwange, Ms. Ruchi Verma, and Ms. Kainodo Gilbert in this discussion today. Viewers will be back next week on another issue from Africa, and we'll have a group of important panelists with us to share more about India and Africa. Good night and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.